And here she said to him in tension and asked him, "Am I wrong? Why do you want to turn me into a monster?" And Claude's response was unexpected when he said to her, "Because I wanted to." So she was shocked and said, "What?" And here Claude said, "Because I wanted to. Your dear brother abandoned you, and even the monsters who live here embraced you. And no one is looking for you, Ray. And no one has come looking for you since you disappeared, and your brother never visited you once. I love you, Ray. You have nowhere else to go." So he approached her and said, "I am all you have." Then he smiled and said, "Ray." And here she was shocked when he told her, "I am immortal. I can never die, and I can't. You promised not to leave me alone, didn't you? Adam, you were lying." And here she said to herself, "Claude," at the time when he smiled while saying, "Now we can really be together forever." And here she went on and said, "He doesn't love me." And here when he saw and got up in silence and she was going to leave, Claude told her, "Where are you going?" And when he tried to grab her, his hands immediately spread away, and she looked at him angrily as she said, "This one, that's not true." And here Claude was stunned by her refusal that they live together forever, so Claude said, "What do you mean?" Then he held her hands firmly, and here she started screaming, "Ray," as she said, "Let me go. Set me free. I don't want to be here with you. I want to go back." But Claude smiled and said, "Back to where? Why? You've found someone willing to take you." And here Ray was looking at him in anger, and she was crying as he continued and saying, "Is it Mary? Or Philip? Or the gardener who stutters?" Then he approached her more and started to say, "Did you really think that none of them knew about everything that happened to you, and everything that will happen to you? How you will change? They are not your family. They're nothing for you." And here she told him, "Ray." He chickened out, "You are a coward." And here she looked at the ring in her hand and said to him, "The day she proposed to me for marriage, do you know what I thought when you promised to love you forever? I was thinking that all my life I had only experienced unrequited love. From my parents, and from Hayes, who left me behind. I was finally thinking, and finally, I found someone who really loves me. But I fell straight into your trap, didn't I?" And here Claude was shocked by her words as she continued and said, "I bet you thought it was permissible to turn me into a blood-sucking monster, didn't you? Because I was left behind with nowhere to go? Because I swore to you? Because I promised to be with you forever?" Then she broke down in tears as she said, "Who exactly am I to you? I said there would be no secrets. But you broke our oath, and you are the one who revoked it first, Claude." And that's when Claude told her, "What's next? What do you want?" And here Raya lowered her head as she said, "Do you really think that this is true love?" And here he was stunned and then said to her, "So you don't want to stay with me anymore, and you want to get out, and you want a Turk." So he moved away from her a step and said, "I feel like you still don't understand, Ray." So he pulled out a knife and he says, "No way. And I can watch you try, but you can't." And here he injured himself at the time when Ray shouted to him and said, "Claude, don't!" But he approached her, and here she told him, "No, I don't want to." But Claude smiled as he said, "Never mind. Continue, Ray." And here he gave her blood by force, and he tells her all we have is time. Then he did it, and she refused and told him, "No, quit it." So Claude said, "Ray, are you sure you don't enjoy this?" And here is Ray. She said, "I don't like it." Claude put his fingers in her mouth as he said, "So why are you so nervous there?" Then he approached her and said, "Here, Ray, have." And here she took my opinion and said to herself, "The smell of blood makes me lose my mind. I can't do this." And here, Claude told her, "I told you it's okay, right?" Then he smiled and said, "You may not understand me now, but it will be different in 50 years. And 100 years later, you'll want to talk to me, at least out of boredom." And here Ray looked at him crying and saying, "I wait," but he grabbed her face and kissed her, then smiled as he said, "And after 200 years, you'll be desperate to be conceived by anyone nearby, and after 300 years, you'll be able to love me again." And here, Ray was shocked and started crying, and Claude continued and said, "Because I'm the only one who will be able to understand you." And here she told him, "Ray, I cannot, no more quit it, I'm serious." But Claude didn't listen to her and kept doing what he was doing and grabbed her face as he said, "Why do you keep saying you don't want him? It seems I didn't do it enough way." And here I was shocked when he approached her and said, while smiling, "Want more blood? That's what you want?" And Waken Ray pushed him away, and she said, "No, I don't want to drink any more blood. I won't. No more. Let me go, Claude." But Claude told her and said, "How many times should I tell you, Ray? There is no turning back, and if you don't drink my blood from time to time, you will lose your mind. Besides, I know you want this. I tell you, no need to hesitate any more." But Ray put his hands away and started screaming at him as she said, "You're wrong, Claudine. I'm not a monster, and I'm not going to drink any more blood, and I don't want to stay with you anymore, and I don't even want to look at you." And here Claude was silent for a moment. Then he picked her up, saying, "Never mind. I expected you to shock. And here is my opinion intention." She said, "Claude, what are you doing? You scare me. Put me down, Claude." And suddenly Claude said to her, "Open your eyes. Ray, look at what you see." And here, when Ray looked at herself in the mirror, she was shocked when she found her fangs. And here Claude said, "Does this sound like a normal human to you?" Then he looked at her silently. Then he smiled and said, "You continue to misbehave. I suppose you can try to suppress yourself. Well, let's do it your way. Try not to drink any blood, and let's see how long you hold up." And here the scene changes for Thomas, who says to himself, "It's been a long time I've been in this dormitory, and it's probably not right to stay here like this when doctors are needed. I thought they had an interesting story to report when coming home." And here he remembered Hayes saying to himself, "This man knows little about this place, and all he does is talk about himself and other trivial things, family, etc., work." So he sighed as he said to himself, "I shouldn't keep wasting my time. It's time to get ready to leave." And suddenly Hayes came calling him, "Mr. Thomas." And here Thomas looked at him smiling and saying to himself, "Talk about the devil." Then he said to him, "Good morning, John. You weren't in your room. I've been looking for you." And that's where Hayes told him, "Ah, I understand. There's something I wanted to ask you about today, Mr. Thomas." And he told him, "Yes, what is there?" And here Hayes said, "About my procedure. When do you think you'll be able to do?" And here Thomas smiled as he said to himself, "What a noisy." Then he said to him, "Yes. I wanted to discuss this with you. I'm glad we agree." And here, Hayes said in amazement, "Discussion." And here, Thomas said, "I think it will actually be a major surgery, and there's no way to do that with the materials I have now." Then he looked at him and continued and said, "I have to go back to the village to get other necessary tools." And here Hayes was shocked by his words. He felt that he was abandoning him. So he told him, "Mr. Thomas," and he, "Yes." And that's when Thomas felt nervous when Hayes told him, "Are you planning to leave soon? Take me with you." "No, I'll go with you to the village now." And here in tension, Thomas told him, "Are you sure? What about your work here? Didn't you say that your condition would get worse if you left this place?" But Hayes said, "You will need to see my case for the procedure. I will do my best to hide it in the way." And here in tension, Thomas said, "But still," and here. When Hayes felt hesitant to take him with him, he held his hands firmly and said, "Mr. Thomas." And he, "Yes." And here Hayes told him with a scary and cold face, "Don't tell me you were lying to me." And of course Thomas denied this and said in tension, "Of course not, I would never do that." And at the same time he says to himself, "Ah, I'm in trouble." And here the scene changes with the snowfall, and Claude was looking out the window, saying to himself, "There is heavy snowfall. I remember she said winter was her favorite season. and he went to give her blood, and he says to himself, "It's been a while since Ray found out everything and made a stir, and she continues to be depressed whenever she has to drink blood." But I started to feel relieved that she was more submissive than I expected. All that remains is to restore her heart. It's easy to say, of course. And here he told her, "Do you want to go out for a walk?" I know you wanted to go outside. But she refused and told him, "No, I don't want to go out. You can go yourself if you want." And here Claude said, "So you don't even want to go out with me anymore?" But Ray fell silent and slept again, saying, "I don't want to do anything. Leave me alone." And here Claude said to himself, "She becomes lethargic, sleeps longer, but this I can afford." And here he brought her candy and went to her and said, "You should wake up now." "Ray, are you still sleeping? You can't keep going to bed like this. Come on, wake up. I brought you something sweet." But Ray told him I don't care. And here Claude extended his hands to wake her up as he told her, "Just take a bite. It might make you feel better." But suddenly he was shocked when he put his hands on her belly. And he says to himself, "There is something in her stomach." Then he said to himself, "Ray still despises me." And yet something like this happened. And here Ray looked at him in astonishment as she said, "Claude, what are you doing?" And here Claude looked at her and did not tell her that she is pregnant and told her, "No, nothing." And at the same time he says to himself, "There's a kid." Then he hugged her and said, "Ray, I love you. I love you." And at the same time he says to himself, "All I want is Ray." And suddenly the scene changes on the maid Mary, and she is looking for the servant Philip, and she started screaming his name everywhere, but she couldn't find him anywhere in the palace, so she felt nervous and said to herself, "For the past few days, he has been earnestly leaving food out the door, but for the past couple of days, he did not come to collect dishes. That's why I had to go out myself." And I couldn't stop thinking about the picture of an unconscious old man on the kitchen floor. And it was as if Philip, and he can no longer suddenly cope with the fact that his master is no longer under the same roof. He stood outside the master's desk for long periods of time before disappearing without a trace. And it's better not to go outside. What if he's standing outside the annex all day? And suddenly she saw Hayes, so she called him and said, "Bay, where you going, man?" And here he turned to her nervously, then shouted at her and said, "Don't even think about stopping me. I will leave this place with Mr. Thomas." And Mary was nervous. She said, "The what?" And here in anger, Hayes said, "Mr. Thomas said he'd fix me. We will go to his clinic to get the surgical materials." So Mary smiled and mocked him as she said, "Do you really believe that you are much slower than you thought?" But he shouted at her and said, "Be quiet. This is an opportunity. As long as this monster does not exist, Mr. Thomas can fix me. I just know that." Mary was silent, then sighed and said to him, "Fair enough. If that's your desire, go. There is no one who will stop you here." And here Hayes looked at her nervously when she finished and said, "You'll realize as soon as you get out. All this is just vanity and false hope." And yet Hayes went. And here she looked at him out the window as he was going with Thomas, and she said to herself, "There is nothing anyone can do to unravel the curse. Believe me, I tried everything. John leaves this mansion. John, who himself is like the palace lady, walks away. So she said I thought I would feel comfortable." And here she went away from the window, saying to herself, "I wish I could leave too."